It's Thursday, April 6th, back for part 2 of our draft prospect preview series. Joining me every Thursday is Charles McDonald. What's up, buddy? Last week we went deep on the running backs. Today we're going to talk about some under the radar type of prospects here, the quarterbacks. A lot of guys we have not heard discussed at all this offseason.
Yeah, no one ever talks about the quarterbacks in any draft season ever. So I'm glad that we are going to be the first people to talk about this year's crop of quarterbacks, which is actually good. I think it's a lot more promising than last year, where we only had one first round quarterback, and I think if my memory serves me correctly, we had two go in like the top 75 picks, Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder, before we got like Malik Willis and Matt Corral off the board in the late third. So there's a lot more firepower this year. I mean, realistically, with the way that the top of the draft is set up and what teams are there, I think this is probably like the best chance we'll have to see of four quarterbacks going the top four picks, because the teams that are up there really need one this year. So yeah, I'm excited. It's a fun class. All these guys are really, really different from each other, which I think has made some of the debates around them a little more interesting than previous years.
Yeah, it's a fun class. It's really, I think, kind of how you feel about the quarterback position overall, like how these guys are going to thrive in the NFL, how these guys are going to, compare to other players, current starters, previous guys, whatever. This class is sort of like a little bit of a Rorschach test for that, I think, and just especially about the development process. So there's a lot to talk about with this class. Let's definitely not waste any more time thinking about that 2021 class and like people trying to talk themselves into Malik Willis as a top 10 pick.
That was so crazy, man.
Tough,
it's over for him. His team might be drafting one of these guys this year.
I mean, you said, now I'm doing what I just said we weren't going to do, but you mentioned the name Matt Corral. The Panthers traded up for Matt Corral last year. I mean,
dude, I remember when he got hurt, Matt Corral got hurt in the preseason last year, because he didn't look very good in a couple of preseason games before that. I was like, oh man, well, that's probably the end of his career right there. And so I was like, no, you think so? And here we are, first overall pick. They traded a lot to not have to start Matt Corral this year. So we were talking about getting into draft stuff last time I was on here, and this is the part of the draft where I'm like, damn, so much of this is a complete waste of time, because we were talking about this time last year, we were talking about Malik Willis going number 2 overall to the Detroit Lions.
Number 2 overall, Malik Willis benched in a must-win game for Josh Dobbs,
who wasn't even on the team like the week before he got benched. And it's like, man, like we spent all that time debating about where Malik Willis is going to go, what's his ceiling, and the Titans decided after like 4 games, no, we got to try and do something different. But we'll still give it our best shot in this episode, because why not?
Yeah, hopefully this won't be a complete waste of the next hour of your lives. Before we talk about the prospects in this draft class, I want to continue pulling on a thread that Charles Robinson mentioned on the last episode of this podcast. He was essentially kind of talking about that 2018 class and how it might compare to this class a little bit. So that was the last time we saw 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. I think we might get 5 quarterbacks in this year's first round, and we're going to obviously talk about those 5 guys. So just to recap the 5 quarterbacks that went in the first round of 2018, if you forgot about it, and you've definitely forgotten about at least one of these guys that he ever existed on planet Earth. Baker Mayfield went first overall to the Cleveland Browns. He topped out as like a mediocre starter, and now he's kind of in the vagabond veteran phase of his career. Sam Darnold traded up. The Jets traded up with the Colts from the 6th overall pick to the 3rd overall pick. He flamed out hard in an awful situation with the Jets and was like mildly better in Carolina when they weren't embarrassing, which was not often.
Josh Allen, around Sam a lot, man.
I was going to say,
I was covering the team for the Gase years up here in New York. That was some bleak stuff, man. Like I remember, I think it was the last year. It was the COVID season 2020. I remember I was sitting there at training camp, and I was like, holy these guys stink, man. And lo and behold, they had like the worst offense again after having the worst offense the year before that. And not to get into too much Sam Darnold talk, but
no, I want to talk about like the lessons like that we learn from these guys here.
I kind of think that Sam might be one of those guys where, okay, well, Sam is one of those guys where if you were just to block out a lot of crap and just look at Sam Darnold's 10 best throws in the
Yeah.
NFL, you would say, holy, this guy can be, a real deal starter. And I think like there's been times, and I think it's why he's going to be in the NFL for a long time, where we've seen the talent come through for stretches. Like even in the part of last season where, he started for the Panthers and he started to put up some good statistical numbers, a lot of that was kind of like fake. I don't think that he was doing a whole lot of, field general type stuff, but there's still like a handful of throws that he uncorked last season where it's like, man, if we can just get him to clean up, X, Y, and Z, he can be a starter. And now he's in San Francisco in a spot where he could actually end up starting some games this year.
100%.
Because,
yeah.
If you look at the timeline of what Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were saying, where they're saying, Brock Purdy's going to be ready, but it might be like 6 to 8 months. Well, 8 months, like we're cutting into a good chunk of like the start of the regular season at that point.
Yeah.
And once you hit September, nothing that you say now matters, because if Sam Darnold can operate that offense and they're starting to win games again, I don't think they're going to go back to Brock Purdy. So it's going to be fun to see if he can kind of start to put it together and make that physical talent some actual production. And if he can't do it in San Francisco, because literally everyone has done it in that system, then it's probably just over for Sam.
Well, I mean, there couldn't be two more drastically different situations than the Jets that you were watching that offseason, like, holy these guys stink, versus what he's going to face in San Francisco. And I feel like the lesson for Sam Darnold isn't it just that, I mean, who knows what would have happened with Sam Darnold if he had landed in a spot like the San Francisco 49ers are now when he was drafted. But I feel like the lesson with Sam Darnold is that quarterback prospects, no matter how talented they are, they can always be failed by hilariously bad situations, which is what the Jets were and kind of have been of late.
And Sam played a role in that too. I mean, it's not like he was, it's not like he was like Cam.
Not a victim of his circumstances completely.
Right. It wasn't like Cam Newton on the Panthers, like in the mid 2010s. Sam definitely had some poo-poo games on his own.
Yeah, that's for sure. With Cam, though, at least he had like professional coaches around him, not like complete goofballs there that the Jets were dealing with. Josh Allen obviously was, I know I blew past Baker, but Baker, I just feel like.
But there's nothing to say about Baker.
Yeah, there's nothing
he's at journeyman phase now.
Yeah, Josh Allen, obviously the Bills traded up twice for him in the first round. They traded up from 21 to 12 and then to 7, and he became an elite quarterback after some early struggles. I think the easy one with him is just like sometimes you got to stick with these guys through early lumps, and like just physical freaks are a good thing to have at the quarterback position.
Yeah, just let him try. And I think, the owners in this league, I think sometimes they don't have the patience to kind of just let things play out and just see what happens. Because I think, after the first, let's call it like season and a half of Josh Allen's career, there's some reason to be like, oh man, we might have messed up here. But they've let him work it out. You just kind of keep throwing back out there. And I think, like, I remember the turning point for me, at least with him, was it was like the Thanksgiving game they had against Dallas a few years ago. That to me, that was like his coming out party, where he was just like, oh man, the physical traits are obviously overwhelming, but he's starting to understand what's going on a little bit better, and the accuracy, especially down the field, has just improved like tenfold. So yeah, I think he's just kind of a case of like, it's like planet theory stuff. There's only so many of these guys that exist on the planet in terms of height, weight, speed, arm strength, and let's just throw him out there and see if he can figure it out. And he did. And I think that we're going to see more teams kind of chase that potential. I think we saw a little bit with Malik Willis last year, even though he went in the third round. But the tools and just finding guys who can do things that most NFL players can't, it's worth a chance,
It's a great example of steadily building up the ecosystem for a player like Josh Allen too, because like I said, they traded up multiple times for him. They weren't like a team that was so bad they need to be drafting 7th overall. Like they had some pieces around him, but not the wide receiver position. That was obviously what they built up along the way. And for me, the turning point was his 2020 season was the big one. But for me, it was like John Brown, and I'm like the biggest John Brown fan in human history besides maybe his parents. Like the dude had a great season as a legit number one type of target there in Buffalo. And it's like, I get no Josh Allen's like underlying metrics maybe aren't great, but he can absolutely take that leap with a guy like Steph Diggs. And so, yeah, the consistent building up of a player is pretty important as well. There's a few Josh Allen types in this draft. I don't think we have a Josh Rosen type in this draft. The Cardinals traded up again from the 15th to the 10th overall pick. He was never even remotely promising. And Charles, the lesson for Josh Rosen is just like, you can't take a dude who's a stone zero as an athlete at quarterback position. Like he was like a Nick Foles type. Like he can't, he has no movement ability.
And the concerning thing with Josh Rosen, and I think Josh Rosen is fascinating for a lot of reasons that don't really have to do with him. But I think looking at the prospect, Josh Rosen, it should be concerning when you peak in your first game in college. Because I remember we were just talking about draft cut-ups before we got on here. And I remember, there's this website called Draft Breakdown, and Josh Rosen, his first game, I'm pretty sure it was against Virginia. And he looked incredible. Like, he looked like someone who's bound to be the number one overall pick from his first game at UCLA. I mean, everything you would want to see. It just looked so professional, clean, accurate, on time. And then he never played like that again, really. And there's supporting cast issues.
That Cardinals team was rough.
Yeah, but I'm even talking about like at UCLA, like there was some supporting cast issues where he was let down by some pretty crappy offensive line play at times. And then that kind of became like his thing as far as people who liked him. Like it would just be like, it's not him, it's everyone else around him. Mm-hmm. And you get through the season with the Cardinals. And to me, I don't understand how people didn't see this as a red flag, where you get through the rookie season and the Cardinals is like, no.
Yeah.
We got the first overall pick. We need to get out of this like immediately. And then he goes to the Dolphins, and that Dolphins team, to be fair, was bad. They were horrible because that was the year, like, this is kind of like the time frame where Brian Flores' lawsuit about the tanking overlaps with this. And that team was horrible. But if you are someone who can be an NFL level player, that talent is going to show through at some point, even in poor situations. And he kind of just floundered around in Miami, and everyone was saying, just keep building around. I'm like, are you guys watching these games? Because just because you liked him 2 years ago doesn't mean you still got a cape for him now. And this goes to something like psyche of draft Twitter stuff, where it's like, you don't have to just hold on to something you thought about 2 years ago. There's no real consequence for saying, I was wrong with Josh Rosen, but you don't have to sit here and lie to me and say, hey, this guy can still play when he's putting up like 3 yards per attempt in Miami. Okay. It's called spade a spade.
The best advice you can get about 3.3 yards per attempt, by the way, you're or 3.3 adjusted yards per attempt. You're giving him too much credit there in that.
Is that the actual number?
Yeah, that is the actual number.
Okay. Wow.
By the way, Ryan Fitzpatrick on that same team threw 20 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Like Devontae Parker had a 1,200 yards. He's one good season in the NFL, 1,200 yards. Like, Ryan Fitzpatrick came in there and immediately made the entire thing not just passable, but like halfway decent towards the end of the season.
Right.
So
okay. That reminds me of something like when I'm going back and forth like these Rosen supporters, and I was like, Ryan Fitzpatrick, you came in here and they look like an NFL offense, and when Josh Rosen came in, they looked like a college offense. And he was like, well, Ryan Fitzpatrick, that's a vet. I'm like, it's Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I mean, no disrespect to Ryan Fitzpatrick, but come on.
My 10th overall pick is significantly worse than Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, I think we've learned two lessons here. One about just draft prospecting is, as Eric Stoner used to say, don't die on bad take hill. I mean, just let it go. When the games are telling you something, you can let it go. Sometimes both things can be true. Like, Josh Rosen's supporting cast was bad in UCLA and bad in Arizona and maybe not so great in Miami, but so he wasn't making it better, which I think comes back to the tools thing, which is he was just never going to elevate beyond his circumstances. Like even a guy like Sam Darnold, like you said, there's 10 throws you could point to. I dare you to find one Josh Rosen throw like somewhere along the way.
Yeah. And I remember the last Josh Rosen thing is, so Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, their first year in Atlanta, excuse me, Matt Ryan's last year in Atlanta, Josh Rosen was on the roster. And,
yes.
There were people I remember there were Falcons fans who were like, hey, maybe he could be Matt Ryan's successor. He was a pretty thought of. I was like, oh, you guys just haven't seen him play. And then he played in a couple games where either Matt Ryan was hurt or it was kind of a blowout situation where they put him in, and he threw interceptions like on every other pass attempt. And I was like, okay, so we can put that one to bed now, right?
His Atlanta Falcons career, 2 completions, 11 attempts, 2 interceptions. So he threw as many passes to other teams than he did to his team.
Oh, God.
Team. Anyways, so there's a lot to learn from Josh Rosen, but I don't think we really have a Josh Rosen type in this class. And then the last guy obviously was Lamar Jackson. The Ravens traded up to 32nd overall from the 2nd round pick that year and a 2nd round pick next year. Obviously, he's developed into a top 10 player in the NFL, or top 10 player at his position. He's won an MVP. We know he's in dealing with a quarter contract thing right now, the whole deal. But I mean, that's one to me. It's like, hey, sometimes if like the guy's one of the best players in the sport in college football, he's a rare athlete, you might want to take a chance on that. And I don't think we'll ever see a guy like Lamar go anywhere near 32nd overall ever again.
No. Yeah. That to me, that was one of those drafts where I felt like I was taking crazy pills, where there were so many things that lined up in his favor, just as far as like what you're looking for from a clean prospect, because it's not like he was playing in one of these, Looney Tunes offenses in college where, where you're not getting anything that translates to Sundays, where you can start projecting. Like, he played for Bobby Petrino, who runs an NFL style offense and was briefly the head coach of the Falcons in 2007.
All too briefly.
Yeah, didn't even make it the full season, and that was his own idea. But Lamar, he played in the NFL style offense, and he's someone who got markedly better every single year that he was in college. And then you throw on, oh wait, he's the best runner in college football too. On top of that, it was just a little bit strange to see, a prospect that really did check off a lot of boxes, even age and like arm talent too, kind of fall as far as he did. And then, the first full year he's a starter, he's an MVP level talent, and he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league since then. So yeah, I'm with you. I can't imagine that a prospect like Lamar coming around again will go 32, because I think Lamar's success would cause people to think a little bit more critically about like all the things that he had to offer coming out of Louisville.
100%. Well, all right. I kind of wanted to take that trip down memory road there, because I think the past does inform the present, and I think it's going to help us a lot try to parse through these quarterbacks here this year. So let's get into it, and let's start with the top 5 guys here, and we're going to go kind of in depth on these, and maybe we'll do some cleanup on other guys at the end if you think there's anyone worth mentioning. But we'll start with Bryce Young. 5'10", 204, absolute star out of Alabama, almost universally ranked as the top quarterback in the class. But there's one catch here. Since 2003, no quarterback who has weighed fewer than 207 pounds at the NFL Scouting Combine. And that 204 is fake. Okay, that's fake weight. We all know that. No quarterback that has weighed that has ever been drafted in round 1. There's not a lot of success stories. So first, Charles, you've said that Bryce Young is the last small quarterback that you're going to go to bat for. So you got a lot riding on this one, pal.
Yeah, I do. I need Kyler to get healthy and, start to turn things around, because I still believe in the talent there. But I was a Kyler and a Baker guy. Baker, obviously, just for different reasons. I think I just kind of way overrated the arm talent that was there with Baker. But with Kyler, I think guys who are that slender, and Bryce isn't even like a powerhouse athlete like Kyler Murray is, because people, I think people forget because he's so little, but that guy runs like a legit 4.3 and can throw it real, like has a cannon arm, and Bryce doesn't quite have those tools. So I think more so than the height, it's the weight to be concerned about, because honestly, when I watch Bryce Young play, I don't really think his height hurts him all that much as a passer. No. it's not like he really struggles throwing over the middle of the field, because I think when you see some of these shorter quarterbacks, they end up being like, kind of deep ball merchants, like Russell Wilson at his peak.
Russell Wilson, yep.
That ended up being fine because Russell was exceptional at the deep balls, but it's easier to kind of just like aim and throw it down the sideline than it is to see over the middle of the field sometimes for some of the shorter quarterbacks. But I think Bryce makes it work in a way where that can be kind of a strength for him coming to the NFL. It's not like he has like a super rocket arm or anything, but the accuracy and the anticipation and the timing, I think, is really impressive from his game when he decides to like work within the structure of the offense.
Right.
But it's just, how many hits can you take when you're not doing that and you're trying to do some like the escape artist stuff? How many hits can you take before that starts to break you down at that size?
I really do go back and forth with the weight, because like sometimes like you look at him and it was like, that's a middle schooler. Like he just looks so small, especially compared to other players. I'll never, I mean, obviously the one video when he's walking into the combine next to a tight end or whatever, it just like, it's jarring to see. But I mean, you watch him play in the SEC and like he gets clobbered out there. Like he's not which could be a good and bad thing, right? Because the hits are already on his body, and maybe he hasn't quite learned. Like RG3 was a great example of a guy that never learned how to not just take absolutely bone-shattering hits. But then there are other players who, like, I think Lamar, on the other hand, is really good at avoiding contact. And Young is not going to be a runner like either of those two guys are, as you mentioned, but he is. He's going to have to learn how to not take a ton of punishment, but it's tough. It's tougher in the pocket to not do that than it is actually as a runner, I think.
Yeah, I think for Bryce, he's just going to have to. He's going to have to be a guy that learns to let plays die in the NFL, because one of his biggest things in college is he can make if I'm Bryce Young, like I can make a college defensive lineman or a blitzing linebacker miss and then buy myself 2 or 3 more seconds to find someone. That's going to be a little bit tougher when all the guys are, the best players that you've ever played against, especially, coming into this season when you're going to be a rookie. And Bryce, like, especially on third down, he kind of goes into like just playmaking mode immediately, which, I mean, he's got the talent to pull a lot of this stuff off. But right. I think in the NFL, when the margins are thinner, he's going to want to play a little bit more in structure and within the flow of the offense, which is something that he's capable of doing. But it's like a behavior that has to be learned almost. And that's where I think he can end up saving himself a lot of punishment and a lot of hits early on in his career.
Yeah, it's tough because that is part of what makes his game so good. And what I think makes him, I know a lot of people have said like, okay, well, if he was 6'3" and 220, like he'd be like a Trevor Lawrence type prospect. Well, he's not, but still I get the sentiment there that creation ability is part of what makes him such a great prospect, but he still has all the other stuff that you want, like the timing, the anticipation you mentioned. I mean, he's really special, I think, as like an anticipatory passer. I think he's really great in that area of the field. He's great at working like the trash of the middle. Like you said, that's not common with these short quarterbacks. It's just tough when the thing that takes him from being a great to potentially like special player is the comfort and chaos and the escapability and the improvisation, but you almost don't really want him doing that because you don't want him to get hit a ton. It's a tough thing it's a tough like wire to walk there.
Yeah, and even like at Alabama, he wasn't someone that was really used as like a ball carrier a lot. Like I feel like a lot of his running is just him trying to make something happen, and I mean he did for a lot of it. I think what makes Bryce's season so impressive to me this year is he wasn't going out there with like the same level of supporting cast that Mac Jones and Tua had at Alabama, where you're pumping out first round receivers. He kind of had to put a little bit, like, or not a lip, but more of a load of the offense on his shoulders. Because really, as far as skill talent went, a lot of it was him and Jahmyr Gibbs just trying to make something happen out there.
Yeah, and
kind of put the team on their backs like that. So, I go back to the Tennessee game where you're going back and forth with Hendon Hooker, who we'll talk about a little bit later, and he's not getting the same level of star talent. Like where you look at Tennessee and they got 2 draft picks at wide receiver this year in Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, and you come to Bryce and it's like, this is all on you, buddy. You got to figure it out. And he had answers for just about every single defense that he played.
I mean, I hate when people are like, oh, I could play in the NFL, or how many passes could I complete if I was dropped into a NFL game or something like that. But sometimes watching Mac Jones back at Alabama, I was like, you know what? if my shoulder wasn't shredded, I could maybe complete a pass, because it was just so easy. The RPO stuff, Jalen Waddle like wide ass open. I mean, you could make it happen. But this is like Andrew Luck rookie year, drop behind enemy lines and like try to shoot your way out. That was basically the Bryce Young offense last year. So that's a great point. Last thing on Bryce before we move to the next guy. Are there any other like red flags in his game besides the frame?
Yeah, I think for red flags, it's like trying to be a hero too much sometimes, and also I don't think his arm strength is like the best. I think he makes up for it in other ways. To me, his arm talent, like it kind of reminds me of where different people, but where Deshaun Watson was coming out of Clemson. Where
that's a good point.
It's not like Watson's out here throwing cannons and shooting, cannonballs over the field. But what he does have is like a really strong just control over where the ball goes. And I think that he and Bryce, like they're able to kind of get through windows by just having really a really strong control over the ball and being able to throw with anticipation. But again, it's not like Anthony Richardson level arm or Will Levis level arm. It's just kind of an arm that's good enough. And I wonder for Bryce, when you put those things together, the fact that he doesn't have like these super duper overwhelming physical traits, and the fact that he is someone who likes to take risks and run around back there, I kind of wonder if that's going to be something that catches up with him in his rookie year, and he's going to have to adjust and just play a little bit more under control than he does at certain times.
Yeah, Watson actually is an interesting like physical comp. Probably not the runner that Watson is, I guess, but I mean, he was like a 4.66 guy. That's actually like an interesting comp. The way he plays the game, although he gets a lot of like Drew Brees type comps, does Bryce Young, and I get that from the accuracy and anticipation point. He's probably a more accurate player than Watson, but I think I can see like sort of a blend of those two guys. Not a freak athlete like Kyler, but like a functional athlete who can do a lot in an improvisation sense. Man, I remember Deshaun Watson getting like how many radar gun talks did we have to have about Deshaun Watson? That was
I'm glad we've left radar gun discourse in the past. That was so stupid, man. Like,
that was bad.
Like, what do you mean? We're throwing routes from people we've never heard of. I might not try to take someone's head off if I'm trying to figure out like how fast they run in the first place. It's stupid.
Yeah, very stupid. We could do a whole podcast like we did last time about, hey, remember Todd Gurley when he played in the NFL? We could do like hey, remember this horrible draft narrative? That's a fun trip down memory lane, maybe for June. All right, CJ Stroud, next guy here, 6'3", 214, multi-year starter at Ohio State. I think he is very, very easy to like, and I've said on the show I've seen a lot of him because of how much work I've done on all these Ohio State receivers. So what makes him a great prospect?
To me, it's like an easy eval, high floor. It's got a pretty high ceiling too. And with CJ's thing is, even before the Georgia game, you're looking at like, okay, I can see the path where this guy becomes a pretty successful starter. And then the Georgia game happens. And you're like, holy, that's the ceiling here. Someone who can make a lot of plays and really put the team on his back. Because I think when you go back to the Georgia game, what made it so impressive was Georgia, like they still showed up. They showed up in a pretty big way, I think, on defense in terms of like winning where they were supposed to win. Like their defensive line, they kind of ate up Ohio State's offensive line and pass protection, especially on the interior. But CJ, he kind of had no problem working his way around it. And then Marvin Harrison gets hurt around halfway through the game, and he just powered through and still kept putting up points on what was pretty comfortably the best defense in the country. So for me, if I was running the Panthers, I'd probably take CJ Stroud because it feels like more than just like getting the base hit and getting on first base. Like we're taking someone who can play right away, but also someone who, as we saw, like on the biggest stage, has the capacity to get a whole lot better. I think there are some concerns like maybe ability to play under pressure and being a playmaker, but to me, that was more like Ohio State not really giving him the chance to do it more so than him being unable to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that it's a bit of a projection. Like you don't get a ton of snaps of him under pressure. You don't get a ton of looks of him, not having great athletes at the receiver position. Like his receivers from 2021, and even obviously with Marvin Harrison Jr. this past year, he might never have an NFL receiving core that's better than Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like that's a realistic thing I think to talk about. But I'm glad you brought up the ceiling, because I do think it exists with CJ Stroud, and the way he's able to layer throws at all three levels. I think he's a very accurate player too, and a guy that the Georgia game is going to get talked about a lot. But like, you also saw other aspects of him. Like, I'm working 2021 on Jackson Smith and Jigba last month, and I'm like, I saw him rip up a touchdown, like, get on the move. Like, it's not as if it was the only time he's ever run. And I do think it's funny that it's like, now it's a criticism of guys like, oh, you don't run enough, when 5 years ago is move to wide receiver if you run too much.
Yeah. We're always right in the long run,
Well, of course, yeah. We never miss on our draft evals. Either they got hurt or the coaches used them wrong. That's the way you get out of it.
That's exactly right.
I do think it's interesting, him versus Bryce Young at the first overall pick. I get why somebody would take Bryce, but I kind of just think of it as like maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but I feel like I'm going to feel like more of a dumbass if I take Bryce Young and he gets hurt and the frame is always an issue, something like that, versus like, and I was trying to swing for a home run or a grand slam, where it's like, well, I could have just hit a triple here with CJ Stroud, and I think he could easily be a top 10 quarterback in the league, and that's very easy to imagine.
Yeah, it's not a sexy pick, but it's one where it makes a whole lot of sense. And I think, especially with the Panthers and Stroud, it just makes a lot of sense as far as like what type of offense, like the best offense that we saw Frank Reich have in Indianapolis post Andrew Luck probably was the Phillip Rivers year, where they made the playoffs and they almost beat the Bills. And a lot of that was obviously Phillip Rivers is not, and especially at that point in his career, he was not running away from anybody. But what did work was they were really good, like intermediate levels of the field, just kind of throwing these timing routes all over the place. I think that's where Stroud is strong. And if you kind of look at, I saw it in the Pro Football Focus draft guide, if you look at his heat map of where he was throwing the ball, a lot of it was like at 10 yards plus, and he was pretty accurate with most of it. I know playing with like a million first-round receivers over the past couple of years definitely helps, but I think that we should be able to kind of be able to separate what he was doing versus what those guys were doing. And I think he still comes up as a clean prospect, even with all the help that he had at Ohio State, which is a lot. We're talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba this year. You got two potential first-round picks. The offensive tackle, the running back situation is nice, but he still played well in spite of that.
Even the Andrew Luck offense under Frank Reich, that was his highest completion percentage of Luck's career. It was his lowest sack percentage, and he was like getting the ball out fast and in rhythm and on time, which wasn't really the case with Andrew Luck, who was more like a play and chaos type of guy for the Colts through most of his career. So I think that would be a really easy translation, him and CJ Stroud there with the Frank Reich marriage. So I don't know. I like CJ Stroud a lot. I think he's just a clean prospect. He's an easy eval, like you said. Anthony Richardson, this one's not going to be as easy. 6'4", 244, absolute MF and freak show out of Florida. He's only started 13 games in college with middling results. I guess I don't really need to ask you what makes him a great prospect, because he's literally the most athletic quarterback we've ever seen enter the NFL.
Yeah, and it shows up on tape. I mean, the guy is just a powerhouse athlete in every facet. It's like 6'4", 244. He can throw it like 100 miles per hour like a pitcher. He's fast as hell. Like, if you're like, he's kind of like the guy that is fun for me to make in Madden, where I just max out his physical attributes, and then we'll actually like grind out some of like the accuracy stuff along the way. But man, like the more I watch, I gotta say, I've been Anthony Richardson pilled. Like I'm in on this. I got obsessed like 2 weeks ago. Was working on an all juice team, and I watched like 8 Florida games. Like it was just back to back to back to back.
Man, what a day!
And I know it's what a great way to spend a Saturday in New York City watching Florida football games from the damn fall. But I think there's a lot to like about his game. And I try not to be one of these guys that's like giving a bunch of excuses for prospects because,
Sure.
I think there's usually a reason why the production isn't there. But man, the receivers at Florida were not good. Like, and I'm trying to be nice here because I don't want to just slam some college kids, but like there was a lot of room for improvement there. And I think like when you watch this year, it's the first year of Billy Napier at Florida. And part of the reason why the Dan Mullen era was starting to fail was because he took his foot off the gas with recruiting. And I think that showed up in a big way this year where, you have like some of these older veteran receivers on teams where, they're missing their landmarks on comebacks. They're dropping the balls that are put, pretty perfectly in their hands. And I'm not saying that, Anthony Richardson is out here like Aaron Rodgers, that level of accuracy, but I don't think that him getting drafted really high and starting week one as a rookie would necessarily be a disaster scenario for him. I think like kind of like with Josh Allen, you kind of just gotta throw him out there and let him figure it out. But I do think that playing in an NFL style offense will be a better fit for him than what they were doing in Florida. Because I mean, they didn't really throw the ball in the intermediate level of the field. It's just a lot of deep passing, and it's a lot of like high level deep passing. It's not the same stuff like Hendon Hooker is doing, where you're just spreading out all over the field, and no one can even think about how to cover this offense because it literally doesn't exist in the NFL. It's more just like, hey, you got to throw this 15-yard dig to someone who's probably not going to catch the ball, and I think that's where a lot of his like completion percentage stuff gets knocked down.
Obviously the physical tools as a runner are obvious, and everybody that's listening to this has seen the highlights and the clips on Twitter and stuff like that. It's easy to find the appeal there, but the arm strength really is incredible too. And I think it's like effortless arm strength too. You've seen for sure. Again, people have seen the video of him hitting the damn ceiling at Florida. I think he wanted to go viral. Was trying to go viral. I get that, but the arm strength on tape too definitely shows up. The physical skills are all there, and I agree with you that like his footwork is a mess sometimes. It really is not too dissimilar to Cam Newton, like overall. But the difference obviously being that he played with a bunch of dudes who never made the NFL, like never even like never even like really had a cup of coffee in the NFL. But he won the Heisman, and that team was awesome. Obviously, Anthony Richardson, like again, middling collegiate results in just one season. So there's differences there, but I think the things that maybe kept Cam Newton from being like an elite. I think I love Cam Newton. I'm a big Cam Newton fan, but the things that held him back from a mechanical standpoint are similar to what that Anthony Richardson's dealing with. But like, again, we've seen guys, if they fix that footwork, if they fix some of those mechanical things, they can get more and more accurate through the course of their NFL career. And I think Cam being one of those guys.
Anthony's interesting because like you go through his tape and you see him rip a bunch of throws and then he'll miss like the same throws. It's like, man, I just watched you do that. But
yeah.
There's a lot of high level like NFL stuff on his tape. I mean, I think he throws under pressure pretty well. I think that, a lot of that is due to his physical stature and his arm strength. But, he's one of these guys where he can take a hit from a blitzing linebacker and still just rip one because he's like the same size as the guys that are going to be trying to tackle him. It's not the Bryce Young thing where you have to go, oh, well, how does this look against NFL? Well, I know how Anthony Richardson looks against NFL players because he's sized like them and he's faster than just about all of them, especially ones that are his size. So I think that really plays a role in his development. Or where he can start to make plays early on, and then while he figures out the pass game, like you have a high floor at least for production with the running game stuff, which I think is where teams are starting to change how they look at these guys. Because if Jalen Hurts, for example, if he can come out and struggle his first season as a starter as a passer, but give you enough on the ground where you can still be a playoff level team, to me that's still production. Like that's still a reason why you should draft someone high in the draft. And I know that there's pushback. Oh, well, no, you can't play that way forever. But how long are these careers anyways? Like,
right. Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, taking a beating sometimes and running back, or not a running back, but, running with the ball. I don't think that's a real reason to not take him high if the peak of his play is something that can get you to a Super Bowl.
I mean, even Cam's career, relatively, like you would take that again at first overall, like without even thinking about it. But he burned bright and fast, and then burned out, once he started to get injured and stuff like that.
But the peak was good enough to get you to a Super Bowl,
Right. And if he was throwing to guys like not Ted Ginn and Philly Brown and Devin Funchess, like they might have won that damn Super Bowl, I mean, if he had, dived on that fumble, that would have been nice. But regardless, not going to relitigate that.
Sore rooms.
We don't need to relitigate that.
And I don't want to talk about my Super Bowl experience either, so we're good.
So Anthony Richardson, though, if we're saying that, like, he's this talented and like he's better as a processor, the accuracy can be fixed, and like I think the Jalen Hurts example is actually way better than the Josh Allen example, because you can build a floor of an offense. I love the way you said that. You can build a floor of an offense and then continue to go around him. If he's that good, and there are some questions about Stroud and Young, is there an argument to take him first overall and just like we'll figure it out?
If I'm Frank Reich, like, okay, in terms of quarterback development, I don't think he's really missed anywhere. We got before Carson Wentz's body failed him in Philadelphia, Frank Reich was on that staff too. And he was, there when Nick Foles was going crazy. Got that one last year at Phillip Rivers. I think like if I'm him, I feel good enough about my track record as a quarterback developer and some of the pieces that we have in Carolina. We got a good tackle duo, got a running back in Miles Sanders.
Even Carson Wentz's last year in Indy, it was only year in Indy, he was not good. But like statistically, if you look at some of the numbers, like it was fake good. And that was a guy who, I mean, he flamed out of there because like the owner literally is like, I got to get this guy off my team. Like, there was the vaccination stuff. There was all kinds of things going on beyond just like what was going on the field, even though what was going on the field was fake good. But yeah, I mean, Frank can absolutely feel good about that part of his resume too.
Right. And if I'm Frank, and not only Frank, but like if I'm looking at this from the Panthers, like ownership standpoint, like we got a guy who is known for developing guys and at least like building an offense that can be functional for long stretches of time. If we believe that to be true, why not let him try to take a chance with this super duper mega talent? And what they've done is like they've set themselves up in a position where I think Anthony Richardson makes sense for them too, because it's not like he would have to play week one. They got Andy Dalton, who I know I'll make all the jokes about Andy Dalton being your starter, but he has turned into like a pretty quality bridge quarterback, backup quarterback over the past couple of years. Like even some of the stuff he did with the Saints last year was fairly solid when they got tired of Jameis being Jameis after he, healed from his injury. So I think that it's a real landing spot possibility for him. I'm pretty sure it's a landing spot that they're still discussing and going over. But I think all three of the quarterbacks that we've talked about so far are in play for number one overall. And Richardson's like it's just the ceiling, man. Like the ceiling is out of this world. And I think his floor is higher than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I mean, the reason the Chiefs won the Super Bowl this year is two things. 1 and 5, 15. Patrick Mahomes. That's why they won the Super Bowl this year. And like that Anthony Richardson can become that guy for the Carolina Panthers. And even if he doesn't, like if he tops out as just like, well, we have kind of a goofy offense here. We run around and like he early career Josh Allen, like he plays in chaos. There's some good, there's some bad. Like I guess I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I said earlier, like, why wouldn't you just take CJ Stroud, hit the triple, and like not mess around with trying to hit a grand slam? You're trying to break a home run record, I guess, if you're trying to hit Anthony Richardson here. But I do think like you could easily just end up hitting a double with him. I don't think it's necessarily, I'm making baseball analogies when I shouldn't, but I don't think it's necessarily like I'm about to strike out if I take this swing here. So I if I was the Panthers, I would say, hey, we moved up to 1 because we are completely comfortable with CJ Stroud. We also like Bryce Young. Like if we end up just taking Stroud, we're fine. But I would talk about Anthony Richardson literally until the last second and try to get on board there.
Yeah. And I mean, this is early enough in the regime that if you take Anthony Richardson and he stinks, you might be able to survive it and get another chance. So why not? I think it's something that they're at least seriously discussing.
Like I said, I would take it to the last second there. All right, well, we've talked about the three guys. Let's talk about Will Levis next. 6'4", 229-pound fella who feels like he's been in college forever. He's absolutely ripped, and he's extremely physically gifted. What makes him a great prospect?
Okay, the other day, Charles Robinson was talking about like him being like yoked, and I didn't really have much to say. Like didn't really know what to say.
He was on this podcast in the last episode too, talking about Will Levis, or maybe we talked about it more after the show. But
yeah, like how ripped up he is, and how there aren't really quarterback prospects like that. I don't know what to make of it. I don't think that being like in too good shape is a bad thing.
The only thing I'll say is like when you're really ripped like that, and obviously I would know, speaking as an expert here, when you're really ripped like that, you're just you're tighter. You're less like the whole pliability stuff with Tom Brady became a punchline, but it is the flexibility within your muscle mass is important, and you can be more durable and you can survive hits. If you're tightly wound like that, I kind of understand it, but it is like, I think there are other things that are questionable about Will Levis, maybe more so than the fact that he's like as jacked as Robert Saleh right now.
Yeah, coffee or mayo in the coffee is another one, but we can move past that.
We can move past that.
I think he's a step down from the other guys, but come on, he's the guy that the NFL is going to love, like on draft day. I mean, he checks all the physical, check marks where you're going. Got the size, weight, arm strength, mobility. I don't think he's like a great intentional runner, but he's got the athleticism to kind of run away and make some things happen for himself. But I don't know. To me, there's just like something kind of missing. I don't know if it's not. It's like the accuracy isn't there all the time, and there's just a lot of games where he just doesn't really show up in ways that help Kentucky's offense. I will say, like out of the supporting cast combinations of these quarterbacks, he definitely had the worst one for sure.
100%.
The offensive line wasn't very good.
Potentially playing hurt last year too. Well, definitely playing hurt last year too.
Right. But we even saw like how much losing like Wan'Dale Robinson to the NFL, how much that hurt him last season. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. Not to jump in on that, just because I've heard a lot of people say that, and it's like, oh, he lost Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, I mean, like a little gadgety receiver who probably shouldn't be like a volume guy in the NFL. And it's like, damn, that really crushed him. It's like, that just shows you how bad it got this year. It's like, we don't have Wan'Dale Robinson's little, Mickey Mouse pop gun production here in the offense. It's a tough break for Kentucky, but it is real. Cause I mean, I do also remember watching and working on Robinson last year for RP and being like, man, this Will Levis guy, like if he can get Wan'Dale Robinson on a post route, he can absolutely whip that thing downfield.
Yeah, he's got some crazy arm strength. I wrote about it last week where I was just like, hey, it's okay to enjoy like some of these quarterback pro days. Like we know that these guys hitting the ceiling is not indicative of how good they will be in the NFL, but it's fun to watch, So like I think even at Will Levis' pro day, like you watch him throw some of these downfield routes, and it's wild, like how quickly the ball gets down the field. And he's not, we talk about arm strength, and I think some people think that means like how far you can just throw down the field in general, but it really is how quickly can you get the ball far down the field. And he's someone that, like, when you see guys that are throwing 50, 60 yards on a beeline, he's got that 1% level of arm strength. To me, it's just like the consistency wasn't there, and it's a little bit of the same concerns with Anthony Richardson at times that I have, where it's like, all right, if you're this talented, why just weren't you a little bit more productive? But I think in the same way, like the supporting cast did fail him a lot. I just don't really see, the whole complete package. And I think when you're talking about his age compared to the other guys, it kind of knocks him down a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. He is a little bit older. Like I said, he's been in college forever. He didn't play at Penn State over Sean Clifford, which is not like the worst.
It's not right. It's not a real complaint.
Like, it's not a real complaint. Like Justin Fields, Jake Fromm played over him at Georgia. He had to transfer. Like, I mean, not saying that Justin Fields like the perfect example. Like Joe Burrow obviously transferred out of Ohio State, but I mean, bro, if you watch Sean Clifford, like it was a little bit like,
yeah. At least I can say with like Jake Fromm, and I think for Burrow it was Haskins. I think made him transfer. Yeah. At least I can say those guys play a lot of productive football,
Yeah,
and
they
they
were
would
winning
respect the
too.
spots. It's a little different from Sean Clifford, but I digress.
I just feel like he's Ryan Tannehill to me, Will Levis. Like if he hits, he's Ryan Tannehill, who I agree with you that Will Levis's accuracy is a little weird in that I think he's not inaccurate. He's just not consistently accurate. There are some wild misses, but there are some great hits. And I think Ryan Tannehill is a great example of a guy that when Adam Gase got, there to Miami and like kind of tried to have him run the Peyton Manning offense, is just like, this is not going to work. Like Ryan Tannehill's not that guy. But then like you get him to Arthur Smith's offense in Tennessee and it's like, just grip it and rip it. Like when there's you play action, AJ Brown on a crosser, like we can have like incredibly efficient seasons as a quarterback. So I feel like Will Levis, if he gets to a spot like that, you had him going to the Colts over Anthony Richardson in your last mock draft. Like I can squint at that and like see how that would work. But again, your ceiling is like Ryan Tannehill, I think, with Will Levis, which is not the worst thing in the world.
We just talked about Josh Rosen going over Lamar Jackson, so anything's possible. Anything's possible. This is the NFL draft, and honestly, I don't know what order, but the more I think about this, and the more that just the board lines up, I don't really do trades in mock draft because I'm not, dude.
That's a lot.
I'm not gonna sit here, man, and just figure out trades. But
the entire process is a little bit like, does any of this matter? Like, if you're doing fake trades, like you're really,
yeah, we're really in the weeds here. I remember I did one trade before the Panthers acquired number 1 overall, and I'm sitting on like a little draft pick calculator website to see like if my trade makes sense. I'm like, dude, what the am I doing? So I'm just like, so I don't really do the trades, but I do think that the top 4 picks in this class will be quarterbacks because, and I think it'll be these 4 guys in some order because obviously the Panthers they would not have traded all those picks to pick any position but a quarterback number 1. Then you have Houston at 2. Humongous quarterback need, and you got a new regime in there that would, I'm assuming, like their own guy. 4 Colts, Jim Irsay's been saying since January they're going to be taking a quarterback. And then at 3, you have the Cardinals, who you're in prime trade down spot for one of these teams that would like to jump Indianapolis to get a quarterback,
or even enticing Indianapolis to come up one spot and then going down from 4.
Right, exactly. So, I don't really see a scenario where at least 3 of the top 4 picks aren't quarterbacks, unless like Arizona just decides, we just need to get a stud and we're not going to overthink it. We're going to take Will Anderson or something like that. But when you look at the trade possibilities, I think all 4 of these guys are going to end up going in the top 4 picks.
I agree with you. And that brings us to Hendon Hooker, our last guy here. And hearkening back to our 2018 discussion, he could be like the Lamar of this class. Hilariously, he's actually just 1 year younger than Lamar Jackson because he's a 25-year-old rookie. Lamar is 26 right now. So I see your reaction over there. I guess I know the answer to my question. Is this just quarterback thirst pushing him up? Hendon Hooker is 6'3", 217. Like I said, 25-year-old future rookie. He was in the Heisman conversation, and Tennessee was at like number 1, before it all came crashing down and such as a torn ACL. So Hendon Hooker, again, I see you shaking your head over there. So what do we think?
First, let me say this. Tennessee fans are annoying. And I haven't really had to deal with them too much. But I see the way that they talk about Hendon Hooker, and they think it's like some from enlightened point of view where you guys just don't get it. I'm like, well, yeah, I do get it. There's a difference between enjoying someone in their play in college. I had a ton of fun watching Tennessee during the season.
Totally.
It's so much fun to watch any team that can score 40 to 50 points against any defense except the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back national championships, and don't forget it. It's a whole lot of fun in watching him and the growth that he was able to have in college, especially transferring from Virginia Tech and then having the success he did at Tennessee. It's a good story. But then when you're trying to evaluate for the NFL, that's a completely different thing. The offense that they're running, it's not real. Like
it's fake news, dude.
It's fake news offense.
It's the most fake news offense ever. And you're so like, you called it Looney Tunes offense at the top. I don't even know if they're Looney Tunes offense. Like that's.
It's like people are getting tricked by You go back to like Roadrunner and Coyote, and Roadrunner to go paint a wall
Yes.
that looks like looks like a tunnel.
Tunnel. Yeah.
Right. And people looking at it is like, oh, that tunnel, that has my franchise quarterback on the other side of it. It's Hendon Hooker. And then you
Bang.
run right into it. So when you start looking at this Tennessee offense, the first thing that you have to realize, and this is just like a drop down from the Bryles offense that, used to tear up Baylor, or that Baylor used to tear up the Big 12 with, going back to his days there before, everything kind of happened with our
A lot of things happened, yeah.
But his disciples they're kind of coming out and running the same offense in college football. The biggest difference between college football and the NFL, hash marks, man. The hash marks.
Yep.
The hash marks are you're playing a whole different game, like with how wide of a set that you can build in college, where, I can be damn near the sideline in college and I can drop, just sprinkle a whole wall of receivers on the other side of the field. And the thing with that offense is when those guys are in that amount of space, that is almost uncoverable. And they all run 4.3s. And all you have to do is just get enough time. Just get enough time where you can fling it down the field to someone who's going to be splitting two safeties, because you literally just cannot cover the amount of space that they are occupying before the ball is snapped. The hash marks, they're located in a different spot in the NFL. You literally cannot run the same formations.
Yes.
And when you look at the offense, a lot of it is just like point and shoot stuff. Like you're sitting in shotgun, you're not even really working on your footwork from shotgun, and you're not really taking reps that work in the NFL like that. So I remember I saw a graphic from Sports Info Solutions that said Hendon Hooker, he took a 3-step drop on 14% of his dropbacks last year, and the NFL average was around 48 or 49%. So we talked about prospects that check boxes, right? Hendon Hooker doesn't check really any of these boxes, right? You're talking about 25 years old, coming off an ACL injury, plays in an offense that hasn't put any quarterbacks into the NFL, except for like RG3. That's the only one. And he was just a top level athlete that you rarely get to see at the NFL level, where you have like legit sprinter speed at track, like legit track sprinter speed back there. And he had wild arm talent that no other quarterback really has. But usually you're talking about guys like Bryce Petty, Seth Russell, who kind of just like sniff around the NFL, but never really make anything. And these guys that have big time numbers in college, but you literally can't run it in the NFL because the field dimensions are different. Or at least like how it's painted is different. So I don't really understand why we're doing this. It's like fool me once, fool me twice type. But here we are getting fooled again. Come on, we've seen this before.
I had somebody ask me, like in my Discord when talking about Jalen Hyatt, like I'm talking about like the stack formation. Like you said, he is like on the other like might as well be sitting on the bench, right? Might as well be. That's how far close to the sideline they are, and he's that back receiver in the stack formation, and he's just. I think he had 700 yards of his production came from being in stack formation, which is crazy all on its own, and he's just running those deep choice routes. And somebody asked me like, well, why won't his NFL team just draft him and do this exact same thing? It's like, because you literally can't do it because of the it might as well be a different sport with the way the field is painted, as you mentioned. So. There's so much there that makes this a complicated evaluation with Hendon Hooker and just this Mickey Mouse offense overall. But it's interesting that there's a lot of like NFL folks, like the people at like the 33rd team, like Greg Cosell, I saw tweeting about it this morning. Like Mike Tannenbaum loves Hendon Hooker. DJ likes him. Daniel Jeremiah likes him a lot. I don't know. It is interesting that there's a lot of like NFL folks that seem to really like him. So I think it just comes down to poise and like, I don't know. He can whip it. Like he's got a pretty good arm. It just you've seen so little of him doing NFL level things.
Well, yeah, and you're talking about. I think because I do think some of his physical attributes are a little intriguing, but we're talking about a 25-year-old guy who's rehabbing an ACL, who is going to have to learn how to play like a totally different style of football than he was playing before. It's like by the time he starts to even figure it out, like he might be 27, 28 years
exactly.
old. And there really just aren't a whole lot of profiles. Like when you look back and say, okay, like I said before a couple times now, checking boxes, he doesn't really check any of the boxes that you see from long-term starters in the NFL. But I do think he's got a spot as like a backup, or we need a quarterback for 3 games here and there. We can start Hooker for a couple games.
I get it. If he was 22 years old, we're probably having a different conversation about the potential upside and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's a weird one, that's for sure. I do think he ends up sneaking into the first round, though, based on everything that we've heard so far. So, all right, last thing for you here, Charles. I know we got to get you out of here. Speed round. Anybody on the rest of the list that's like mildly intriguing? Stetson Bennett, Aiden O'Connell, Tanner McKee, Jake Hayner, Dorian Thompson, Robinson, Jaron Hall, Max Duggan. It's not Max Duggan. Clayton Tune. Any of these guys? I mean, Stetson Bennett, I think. Yeah, he could have Bennett, like a Colt McCoy career.
I kind of think Stetson Bennett in the right spot could have like a little meme season, like Brock Purdy did.
He's not a meme season.
Yeah. I'm of the opinion that Brock Purdy's season was pretty damn overrated, and I'm not sure
at least say like a Gardner Minshew meme season. I mean, for God's sakes.
I don't know. Well, yeah,
we'll see.
Something like that. Something like that. I just mean like if you put Stetson in a spot where he's got some good players around, you tell him to point and shoot. I think he can figure that out, and he can run too. Like,
yeah,
I think the biggest concern with Stetson beyond the beyond him being like 25 and small, didn't really seem to take this draft season all that serious, which is a little bit concerning. I mean, he getting arrested, skipping the Senior Bowl, which is like, dude, you're the type of person that should be at the Senior Bowl.
100%.
You are the type of quarterback that should be there. Someone that's played a lot of football and might thrive in a setting where, you're just playing football again. And then at the Combine, he ran a 4.6. I think close to a 4.7. Honestly, I think watching this tape, he's a good deal faster than that. Hasn't had a great offseason circuit. And it's like, you're 25 still doing these things. Maybe you need to grow up a little bit. But the other one I like is Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I don't think he's a guy that goes in the first 2 days of the draft, but maybe he's like an intriguing, day 3 developmental guy. Like, hey, you can run and you can throw, and you've played in some of these offenses like Chip Kelly has run where, you're starting to see more of those concepts at the NFL level. It might be like a nice little, change the pace backup quarterback for a team.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I couldn't tell you, other than Max Duggan and Stetson Bennett, those are like the only 2 guys I've seen on this list. Because I'm definitely not wasting my time watching a bunch of quarterbacks that like would be lucky to be Taylor Heineke. Basically, I'm not trying to do that. So I like those 2 names. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Well, Charles, this was awesome, fantastic stuff, great episode, and I appreciate you doing it, pal.
All right, yeah, we'll be back next week. I don't know what position. Running back?
Oh, dude, we're talking wide receivers next week.
Okay, that's right. I got all mixed up.
Clear 3 hours from your schedule, pal.
Yeah, I'll just interview you next week. See how that goes.
Yeah. Just take the reins of my own podcast. That's totally fine. I'm cool with that. So yeah, that is going to do it for us this week. Wide receivers next week, going to be pretty awesome. It is an interesting draft class, that's for sure. But this quarterback stuff was awesome. I hope people really enjoyed both the look back on memory lane and, of course, all the stuff from this. This is a fun quarterback class, man. I can't wait to see what happens. I at the end of the draft season, we'll have to really find where we're coming down on this like Panther stuff at number 1, because I still think it is so intriguing. But that's for another time. For now, I'm at Matt Harmon _BYB on Twitter. He's at 4verts on Twitter. Shout out to Charles. I found out he had a great acting career in a previous life this morning. So,
and I died in 1964, 3 years before my dad was born.
Also, as somebody pointed out, before the Falcons were created. So you managed to. Somebody tweeted that back at us. So shout out to you.
Thank you. I'm appreciating being alive for now, but maybe you could revisit the dead thing in a couple days.
Oh, for God's sakes! Well, just stick around for the receiver episode next week. If you want to dip out before tight ends, that's fine. Anyways, while you're following us on Twitter, of course, make sure you're following at Yahoo Fantasy. I'm going to be back on Tuesday with a Western themed teams that will shape the draft. We're talking Seahawks and Raiders. That's going to be absolutely electric. Until then, we're out.